Thank you, Drew, for praying, and for Julie and Ken. Just so grateful for their witness and all that they shared. As they shared today, during the month of October, we're going to be talking about generosity and money and possessions. And I just kind of want to crack it open and say, it's awkward and weird to talk about money in church. When I was going in seminary, I was thinking about at some point that's going to be part of the job, and I dread it. And so that's why I had Ken and Julie to talk at the top of this series about it. So they can, honestly though, it is awkward. And here's why, and you probably feel this in yourself. No matter your financial background or your family came from, we all carry baggage around about money and finance and possessions. Because we live in a culture, frankly, that props up money and possessions so much in a way that churches for a long time have tried to combat and try to curb what it means to care about stuff over people. And so when we talk about generosity, as we do in October every year here, we want to have open and honest conversations, and that begins with unpacking our own junk and stuff about money and possessions. And so when we go through this series together, I hope you see me just bear it in terms of that stuff, I have it too. And the church has it too. The church has to be open and honest about the ways that we failed in talking about and communicating about money and possessions. For us too, just so I can give you kind of the conclusion of today's sermon, so we can be free. That Jesus frees us from the burden of our shame around money. That Jesus frees us from the anxiety we might have about finance. Not that things get easy the moment we start to follow Jesus, and as some churches and some pastors want to teach, if you just prayed a little harder, believed a little bit more, your financial situation would turn around in an instant. We don't believe that or teach that at all. But we do believe that in Jesus, we can feel free to be open and honest and free to share and free to be generous. And as Ken and Julie just enumerated, free to give ourselves away, as we sang together today, as Jesus did. He gives himself away recklessly, openly. And so I just want you to hear the heartbeat of this series called Enough that we're going to be going through the next 4 weeks. And in concert with the series that's happening at St. Luke's just across the parking lot, that we're connected in the heart of our mission to reach the city and see it transformed. And so that's really the foundation of this. So thanks for being here today. If it's one of your first times here, we'd love if you would check in. There's a QR code on the screen. You can scan that, or you can give it a shot. One of those branches logos in front of you in the chair seat back pocket in front of you, if you'll tap your phone to it, 99% of the time it'll take you to the check-in. So give that a shot. It has a little NFC chip in there, and also gives you an opportunity to give if you would like to do that as well. But thank you for being here today. If we haven't met before, my name is Colin. I'm the pastor here, and I'm just grateful that you're with us today. And like I said, we're talking about money in this series called Enough. And, really, it seems pretty elementary on its surface, easy to say, when we talk about money, I want to know what Jesus had to say about money. I want to know what Jesus taught his disciples about possessions. I want to look at the early church, the first century, and what they did and how they conducted themselves with money and possessions. So we're going to look in Matthew the next 4 weeks at very specific, often short teachings, often incisive, punchy, kind of uncomfortable teachings of Jesus on the topic of money and possessions. So we're so glad that you're here today. Like I said, our perspectives on money and possessions often are inherited. The way our parents conducted themselves, maybe well or not so well with money, maybe how our peers did, the culture we grew up in, maybe the country or the background we had, the way we talked about money, whether we went to church or not, and what sort of church it was, and whether we experienced generosity and gave ourselves to that practice of generosity. Is not like a one-time thing, but an ongoing spirit and posture of generosity. We all bring our stuff. And maybe you're already thinking about it, I have anxiety about money. I wonder if there's ever going to be enough. Kind of the spectrum of scarcity or abundance, and I'm somewhere in the middle. No one's totally 100% abundant, nobody's totally scarce. Or maybe you're like, dude, I'm the scarce guy. I'm there's nothing. There's not enough for everybody. There's not enough to go around. We all somewhere fall on that spectrum. And I was thinking this week, and I've shared about this before, of watching my parents pay for stuff when I was a kid. My mom would write a check, and I had this really ongoing instilled memory of then we'd get in the car after going to the grocery store, go buy clothes or whatever else, and she would sit in the driver's seat of her car, and then she'd open her checkbook and put in the purchase and balance it or whatever, and kind of do it little by little rather than doing it all at once, and she'd stick receipts in there and kind of keep it all analog, and I just have that really burned into my brain. But I also remember several times, one in particular that I've shared before, of sitting next to my mom in church, And our pastor, Mackie, a mentor, a hero of mine, at the end of the year, as often pastors do, saying like, hey, we're at the end of the year and every gift matters and we want to make our budget and everything. And my mom opening her checkbook and writing a check for $200. That's the amount I remember. And I was a little kid, but in my mind I was like, we're never going to eat again, you know? And I had a lot of anxiety about money because I had no concept of that amount of money and really wanted to lean over to my mom and be like, are you sure? Like, can we do this? And it was fine, but I had a lot of anxiety about it. I heard this story this week. Josh Porter is a pastor at this church called Van City in Vancouver, Washington. And he and his wife, Abby, have a son named Beck. And they're trying to instill in Beck, he was like 7 or 8 years old, the practice of generosity. And that was a great thing, like how to bring your children into this practice of generosity. So you teach them from a young age that we're people who give ourselves away. We give the things that we have to other people. And they were at a store or a mall or something, and they saw during Christmas time a toy drive. And Beck didn't know what a toy drive was. So Josh explained it to Beck, and you're like, hey, you know, there are some kids at Christmas that don't get presents unless they get them from a toy drive. Beck's heart was broken. He's a kid, he starts crying. You're like, there are kids that don't get gifts at Christmas? He's like, yeah. So, you know, you go buy gifts for these kids, and they had them represented on the wall with pictures and their ages and their little boys or little girls and the sort of stuff that they liked. And so he invited Beck to find a boy that was like him, same age, approximate interests. And he said, buy something that you would buy for yourself. And Josh shared, he was like, I shouldn't have told him that because we were at the store way longer than we had promised my wife, you know, because he had to pick just the right thing. So we bought a gift, I don't know what it was, an action figure or something, and they put it in the donation box, and they got in the car to go home, and Beck was shaking. And Josh asked him, like, you know, what's going on? And he's like, I can't wait to get home and tell mom about toy drives. She knew what they were, but Beck was so excited. This, you know, it's learned. Our habits around money and generosity are learned or inherited, how we're raised, how we grow. And so Josh gave this gift then to Beck that you give something you would give to yourself to somebody else. How do you think about money and possessions? It's in the air when we talk about politics or when we look at the news. If there's money enough for this people group, there's money enough to go to this project, or how much money it takes to survive, and we talk about wages, and you know, we have different political persuasions around that stuff, and it's just in every conversation we have, and we bring ourselves to those conversations. How do you think about money, especially when it comes to giving, and not just to the church? We look at the charts now, and there's some folks here I know that could give you better statistics than I could about how the giving landscape is way more spread out in America than it ever was. The share of people who give to church is so much smaller than it used to be, and it's spread out around causes that are worthwhile causes, things that you care about. And you know what time of year it is. You like flip on NPR, and it's like, I just want to listen to the interview, but so-and-so is going to come on and say I can get a tote bag if I give $25, you know, seasonally. But then something, occasionally a story or a cause or something grabs you, and you're like, got to do it. I'm going to give my money, and you're not alone. It's spread out across so many more causes now. But I listed on my whiteboard this week and kind of wanted to boil it down to 3 dispositions and postures we typically have toward money and possessions. Maybe one of these resonates for you. Maybe all 3 of them do. Shame. We feel shame about money. Maybe that we've overspent, or we haven't done a good job, or that we feel like we're in a bad financial situation and we feel bad about it, or we feel bad that we haven't given enough, or we see our neighbors and they give way more than we do, and so we feel bad about it. And again, I want to get you to the conclusion of the sermon early and say you should be free from your shame about money. I think Jesus frees us from our shame about money and possessions. Second is approval. We love to see people give, and we love other people to see us give. Not just financially, but of our time. You know, like we're kind of in a culture of kind of self-propagation and self-serving and self-attention, and say like, look how good I was. Look at my charity work. Look at this trip I went on. Here's the selfie I took with these poor people that I helped, you know. We love approval. And third, this kind of posture about money is, I mean, really, in and of itself, it's transactional. I give so I get something. I deposit this much, and so I get this thing or this amount in exchange. I get a return on my investment. The church hasn't done a great job, I think, in a lot of ways, and I say the church with a capital C, all over the world, in talking helpfully and in a way that frees us about money and possessions. I can tell you because when I do premarital counseling with couples before I marry them, I do this thing called Prepare and Enrich. A lot of good stories around Prepare and Enrich because I find out things about people that go to my church that I didn't know about them. They find out things about each other, and I get to witness them learn these things about each other. They take this long assessment, and they then reflect on their relationship together. Landon and I took it after we were married, and we just recently revisited it because we wanted to see how great things are now compared to back then, and they have improved, thank God. And see where you were and see where you're going and see how things change on one of the sections in Prepare and Enrich. And I encourage you, if you haven't done it, I'd love to walk you through it, even if you're already married, you're thinking about getting married, to go through Prepare and Enrich, and I'd love to help you do that. Let's talk about it. One of them is about money and possessions. And every once in a while, and this only happened to me twice. I had a couple tell me one time, I say, this is a tool for you to have conversations. Here's the section about money and possessions. You guys are so far apart in how you think about money and possessions. How is it when you talk about it at home? And they said, we've never really talked about it before. You guys know this. If you're thinking about getting married, you're in a couple, you're in a romantic relationship, or you're already married and you haven't talked about money, that's not good. I was thinking about it this week. I was thinking about it Prepare and Enrich has a thing about trouble. This is gonna cause trouble. And I was singing TROUBLE to the tune of Hot to Go in my head. This sounds very troubling. That people are gonna not talk about this, and then they're gonna get married, and then they're living with this person, they're rubbing shoulders with this person, they're in proximity all the time. And I always tell couples, I'm like, you're marrying all the things you love about them, and you're marrying the person with all the things that you don't know that you hate yet. Their habits that you wish were different, the way that they talk about certain things or things they do in the kitchen or in the bathroom, or they clean a different way than you. You marry all of it. You marry the whole person. And so you also marry their finances. So talk about it. This is my kind of sub-sermon today. If you're in a romantic relationship, talk about money. Jesus, let's get to Jesus. Yes, thank you. Jesus, in his preaching, if we were to compile it all together and put it in a pie chart, a quarter of the time, 25% of the time, he's talking about money and possessions. So that would be then my strategy. From now on, every fourth week, I'm going to talk about money. That sounds awful. But I'm not Jesus. And Jesus could say it better than I could. And Jesus was talking to a people that needed to kind of reassess their relationship with money and possessions because he wanted to think about things that were deeper and more long-lasting and more important. But just keep that in mind as we hear these words from Jesus today, that a quarter of the time, Jesus talked about money. And there's the kingdom, there's love, there's everything else, there's discipleship, and then a quarter of the time, Jesus talked about money. And here's one of those teachings. This is in Matthew 6. It says this: beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Friends, this is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. You'll see all over Jesus' teachings on money and possessions that when he's talking about it, he's talking about something deeper. Not just good financial skill. He's not like first century Rabbi Dave Ramsey or something. He's talking about the heart. Or some people quote it and they misquote it. They say, money is the root of all evil. And Jesus' literal words are, the love of money is the root of all evil. Or likewise, he says, you cannot serve two masters. You'll love one and hate the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Or you cannot serve both God and mammon, this representative deity of money and possessions. It's about worship. It's about the heart. And that's what Jesus is talking about here, that it was actually a really common thing, a virtuous thing, a public act of giving alms, of giving to another. And apparently there was this practice then of saying, look at me, I'm giving alms. Look at me, look how much I'm giving. Here's the amount, look at the check, it's in bold, I'm dropping it in the basket. Jesus is pointing out this common practice and saying, when you give alms, don't do as the hypocrites do who blow a trumpet and draw attention to themselves, but do it in a way that your left hand doesn't know what your right hand is doing. Of course, as a single person, unless you have some other issue going on inside, is an impossible task. And Jesus in these teaching hyperbolizes over the top to say, you want it to be so secret, so pure, so opposite of that, that it's as if your left hand doesn't know that you're giving and your right hand is giving. That you want it to be so pure, so simple, that it's this heart thing, it's this posture that you have, that it's about the heart of giving to another. It's about this invitation to be generous as God is generous, that there's no room for self-congratulation. Again, likewise, there's no room for shame. There's no room for congratulations. There's no room for attention. There's no room to expect something in return. There's only room for the giving of the gift itself. We miss this in reading the text, that when Jesus talks about the hypocrites, there's a kind of underlying understanding of what hypocrite literally means, which is taking a mask off and putting on another mask. Jesus is describing, you take off the mask of this kind of self-important person in the world, and you put on your almsgiving mask. And you say, over here, I'm powerful and important. Over here, I'm very charitable. Over here, I am a status symbol. Over here, I'm very, very humble. The humblest person you've ever met, dropping my alms in the basket. Jesus' teaching, again, isn't about shame. It isn't about kind of dissuading you from giving. It isn't about kind of bringing up all your baggage about money and possessions. It's about motivation. It's about the mask that you wear or you don't wear. Again, it's about your freedom from all the external things that pile on you to feel bad about money, to feel worried or scared about money, to free you from this expectation that we have in the West that once we give, we get something back. And again, to point us to the purity of the beauty, the joy that comes, the hope that comes, the transformation that comes when you simply just give generously. Jesus frees us from our competitiveness. Some of you are hearing that and like, I don't want to be freed from being competitive. My favorite group of teenagers won yesterday, so I love competition. But Jesus frees us in our possession and the stuff that we have from saying, my stuff matters more, or my stuff is going to help more, or my gift is going to make the biggest impact. Or Ken and Julie said, it doesn't matter the amount of the gift. It matters that Jesus is calling all of us to be generous and to give. And not just to the church community that we call home, but to a variety of causes. I'm humbled by the stories I see over and over again on TikTok or on the news of people who are giving away their apartments they don't live in during the year in North Carolina, so someone who's lost their home has a place to go. People who hiked miles and miles and miles to help an elderly person whose home was nearly swept away and they have no supplies and they have no power. Who are giving themselves away and giving their stuff away just to give it away. This weekend, yesterday, we had 250 people as a part of the Big Serve. It's something we do a few times a year as part of the St. Luke's family. And the main project of the Big Serve this year is this project called Sleep in Heavenly Peace. I, like Beck at the top of the sermon, who didn't even know about toy drives, am still regularly shocked by the statistics about how many children sleep on the floor and don't sleep in a bed, don't have a bed to call their own. And that's the project of Sleep in Heavenly Pieces. So a kid has a place they can lay their head, a set of sheets and bedding, a place where they can put their stuffed animals, a place where they can feel cozy and safe and warm and home. So this weekend, 250 volunteers, so over 759 service hours, what Charity told us this week, created 60 beds, built 60 beds, and delivered 46 of them, the rest of them still to be delivered. And on top of that, packed activity bags for kids for worship on Sunday and had closets organized over at our Gethsemane campus. And they loved the gardens and the landscaping and beautified the place. And I say all this, you're like, I thought we weren't supposed to toot our horns about this stuff. To say, I look at that project, I look at those people, and some of you were there. I look at some of the people that gave them their Saturdays away to do this. And I see exactly what Jesus was talking about. With no exchange, with no expectation of something in return, but simply for the gift, for the beauty of giving something away. God's mission, we talk about like our mission. I think it's proper to say God has a mission, and we have the privilege of stepping into it. We have the privilege of contributing something to it. We don't say like, hey, I have a mission. God, would you help enliven it? Would you give something to it? Would you contribute to our mission, God? We flip it around and we say, truly, God is trying to do something in our city, in our neighborhood, in our church, in our world. And we ask ourselves, at the top of these 4 weeks, we're going to talk about money and possessions together. How can I contribute to it? And I think the first step for our contribution, no matter the amount, no matter the time, no matter the energy we can give to God's mission to reach people in our city, the first thing God has to do, and I know he can do it and is doing it, and we invite him to do it with us and for us, is to free us from all the stuff we bring to our conversations about money. The shame and embarrassment you might feel about it. The way that you feel like that when you give, you need to get something in return. The way that we want to be seen for our gift. God frees us from that. And that's my prayer for us as we talk about it over these 4 weeks. And as I shared at the beginning, I have stuff. When I was preparing this sermon, this whole time I was like, ugh. This is not like, I'd rather talk about small groups like we did the past 2 weeks, you know? I'd rather talk about justice. I'd rather talk about, these kind of high-minded theological things about how we're freed from our sin and we're freed by Jesus to follow him. I'd rather talk about discipleship. I'd rather talk about all that stuff. And until I'm convicted in my prayer and in my preparation for the sermon that all of it is connected, that all of it is together, and that in that freeing that Jesus does to us in our spirit, to free us and justify us from our past and transform us for the future and continue to work on us into the future, that includes our stuff. Katie shared the story, and I think it's a myth, but it's a good illustration, that Sam Houston, from which our great city takes its name, was a great contributor to his church. And in fact, at a time when their church was in a difficult time of a difficult financial situation, we'll say, he paid the pastor's salary out of his own pocket. And someone asked him, again, apocryphal, maybe not 100% true, but again, a good illustration. Someone asked him, why do you do that? And he said, because when I was baptized, my wallet was baptized too. All that to say, all the things that God does to us, frees us, transforms us, gives us a heart to care for others, makes us other-oriented people of love, God does that to our stuff too. And that's a hard thing for me to say because I love stuff. I'm susceptible to a good deal. It's like $12.99, no. $10.99 with $2 shipping, yes, I'm that guy. You see those memes, you're like, that's Pastor Colin. I'm like 100%, I'll do it. But I'm in recognition of, I'm humbled by, I'm reminded over and over again that it's not just about this kind of nebulous out there spiritual stuff. It's about my day-to-day. It's about the stuff that I care about. It's the stuff that I worry I might lose. It's the stuff that I kind of fear for its security. And my prayer for you, and my prayer for myself, and my prayer for this community is that we'd be set free. That God would set us free to be the generous people he's calling us to be. Whatever that means for your own situation. No amount expectation, no percentage expectation as some churches want to heap on you, but that you'd be free to be who God is calling you to be in this moment, in this season, to be generous as he is generous. I'm thankful to God for that invitation and hope he continues to challenge us to be the generous people he's calling Branches to be together.